Alrighty guys, today we're going to be talking about range of motion. This has to do with kind of our limbs and how far they can stretch and what looks natural when you're drawing figures. Basically, all your limbs have a certain range, right? You can only stretch so far. You can't take your head or your legs and put it over your head while standing straight up. You know, it's just, you can't be done, right? There's only certain things that your body can do and how far it can stretch and how far things can go. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to be using a 2H pencil. It's nice and sharp. Make sure you've got yours ready to go. You can also use a 2B. Generally for sketches like this, you want to try and keep things loose and light. So that's just a little tip for you guys. Be fast, be loose, be light, and be accurate. So first, what we want to do is I also want to talk to you about how people stand and what looks natural. Generally, when we've been drawing recently, it's been like, you know, you have your guy, you know, and he's very stiff, right? Just kind of standing there, blah, blah, blah. All the proportions might be right, but he just looks sort of stiff. What I want to try and show you guys is how to make your figures look a little bit more like they're actually standing. So let's say we start with our head here again. Always start with your head. When you stand, often you've got your body twisted in some way, right? So let's say we've got, I'll exaggerate here a little bit, but we'll have our shoulders are a little bit off. So I'm going to put that at a bit of an angle. Make sure you put your shoulders in there, and see how this line kind of runs through like that. You can put in your spine and your rib cage. But already it's got a little bit more character than this guy over here, right? Same with the hips. Basically, every major joint can have a line going across like this in order to kind of signify where things are going to go. So I'm going to make the hips go the opposite way. They're going to be going up. Something like this. And again, this might be a little bit exaggerated. That's fine. But you'll notice now we've got this sort of shape going on here. It's going up and to the right while the shoulders are going down and to the right. Now, the joint that is higher, so in this case, the one on the right-hand side, this hip here, that's going to be one that's going to be bearing the weight, okay? So this leg here, the leg on the right, is going to be straight. It's going to be supporting the weight of this character. Make sure your legs are nice and long. So this foot is going to be planted. This foot, however, we're going to make the knees kind of at the same angle as the hips. This foot, if we were to continue going straight down, it would be lower, right? It would be lower than this foot, which we don't want. What we want to do is we want to make it look like this is the ground here, right? That's what he's standing on. Maybe he's got it slightly bent, and maybe only his toe is touching the ground, something like that. Often when we stand, this is how we stand, right? We shift our weight from one foot to the other. This is obviously a little bit exaggerated, but we don't stand on both feet very often. Get his arms in there. Remember, his elbows should be about two heads down. So 1, 2, 3, actually 3 heads down. Right at his belly button, and his hand should reach about mid-thigh. Now let's get into range of motion here a little bit. So with this hand here, let's kind of make him do something a little bit more interesting. This hand has essentially a range to it, right? We could have, we could make it go straight out and make sure that it's going to go down and touch the right spot here, same as with this hand, mid-thigh. But we can also, because there's a joint here, we can move this part, right? So we could have several different, areas of where we want that hand to go. And that all of these would be fine, right? And what happens is we end up getting kind of this arc of the range, right? That's kind of like our limit of how far this hand can go, right? It would look a little bit silly if this hand suddenly was way out like that, right? There'd be something very wrong with his anatomy if that were the case. It can be sometimes shorter, and we're going to get into this when we get into foreshortening, but this is just a bit of a teaser here. If we make our hand joint bigger and shorter, it's going to look like it's kind of coming towards us, right? As things get bigger, they get closer to you. So we're not going to worry about that right now, but we can just pick a particular hand. So maybe I like this one here at the end, and I'll erase all the other ones. So that's basically how you make a figure look a little bit more natural in your drawings. Just drawing lines like this along the hips and along the shoulders and knees can really give your figures a bit of a boost in terms of natural ways that they stand. Okay, let's try doing a picture here. I'm going to turn to my booklet here. I got the same booklet that you guys have. Let's try doing number 89. So this is the guy that's kicking. I'll put it on the screen there for a moment. That's what this one looks like, number 89, the guy kind of kicking there. That's the one that we're going to draw. I'm just going to have this up here. What we can do is, this is a great one because it has lots of range to it. So let's draw him right beside here. Again, I'm going to start with the head. And I'm going to measure, I'm noticing that there's kind of a, his head is an egg shaped. Ordinarily, we kind of draw sort of this egg shape when we start drawing heads. This is more like a D shape, a capital D. And his head is going down. We want this line to be kind of against his chest, right? He's looking down as he's kicking up. So I'm going to have his spine kind of comes down like this. His hips are here. His shoulder is right behind his head. That's pretty good. This leg, actually his knee gets quite close to his face. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to measure and just kind of take note of how close the knee gets to his face. It's going to be pretty close. You don't want it too far away. And this leg is going all the way up here. That's his ankle, and then his foot will go a little bit further. Something like that, whatever. I'll fix that up later. Now, with this other foot, I'm noticing that the bottom of his heel basically is in line with his shoulder. Okay, so this is going to help us give us a little bit of balance to this piece. Just slightly bent here. And then it comes back around to about that line there. Something like that. We'll get the hands in. We didn't do the rib cage. Let's get that rib cage in there. The rib cage is, his chin is basically right up against his chest, right? So it's going to be quite close. He's not going to have much of a neck. Something like that looks great. Put the hands in. This arm is going basically straight out. It's basically flat. And his hand kind of drops down, dangles down. This one is going up. Now this hand actually isn't too much higher, if I look at the reference, than his foot. So you got to make sure that this that's accurate, right? We don't want it going off too high. Okay. It's looking good. Just adding a little bit to the meat onto him here, giving him some form rather than just a stick figure. And this shouldn't take you too long, right? You're just basically connecting the dots. Take a look at what your figure looks like and get it as close as you can. Next, you guys know what to do. You erase the bones. And then we can get into the detail. So if you guys want, you can just quickly kind of get in some of the major muscle groups. So I'm looking in, there's a big muscle right here. Big muscle group right there. Goes into his knee. And I'm noticing that his leg kind of has this S sort of shape, elongated S. It's curved along the outside. So I'm going to try and get that sort of a shape in my drawing here, right? So I want this long S. Your calf should bulge a little bit. You can always refine. Remember, you can always refine what you see. So if your leg wasn't quite big enough, well, make it a little bigger, right? All the lines that we've made up to this point are all just guides. They're just there to help us. You can ignore them. You can alter them. Whatever you need to do. Noticing there's another big muscle right here. So I'm basically just drawing an oval right there, right? An ellipse. Something like that, looks pretty good. All right, let's get his shoulder in here. And he's kind of got this weird hoodie thing on. Not really sure what it is. But we want to make sure that this has got it's almost like a triangle in the background, you know? It's kind of got this triangular shape. Something like that. So try and get that as close as you can. It's not super important. If you just want to worry about the figure, that's fine too. Elbows here and stuff. Run out of room for my hand. In terms of faces and stuff, if you just want to put a line for where the eyes go, that's fine. We're not at the point where we're drawing faces yet. All right, that's pretty good. I'm not going to worry too much about shadows and stuff like that. But I will kind of point out that this guy looks pretty balanced, right? He looks like he's kicking, he's not falling over. That's because basically his center of balance, this foot, is basically right underneath, right, the center of the top of his body, his head, his shoulders, someplace in there, right? It's all kind of balanced on this line. Now, if we had put his leg over here, or something, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up. Well, now it looks like he's falling over this way, right? It looks like he's about to tumble backwards. And that's the same as if his leg was way the heck over here too. Well, now he's off balance again, and it looks like he's going to fall forward that way, right? So having this leg right in the middle, right underneath his body, that gives him a sense of balance. That's important. If your person is, you're drawing your figure and it's starting to look something like this, well, he's not very balanced, is he? He looks like he's going to fall over. You want to make sure that you have a strong up and down center of balance, right? If your person is standing. If you're drawing Superman and he's flying through the air, well, you can do whatever you want because he's flying, right? Let's do one more. And I'm going to look at number 10. All right, so we're going to move on to our next drawing. And this is a drawing of a woman kind of crouching and kneeling before maybe a pool of water or something. But she's kind of curled in on herself. So we're gonna try and draw her. The big thing with this is going to be figuring out the size of her head and making sure that that head isn't too big or too small. Because we don't have the full length of the body, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to figure out what that exactly is. So again, starting with the head, always start with the head, even if you don't know how the measurements are going to go. Put the spine in, kind of curls around like that. Her shoulder is right sort of behind her head, and it's up. We kind of get the sense that her shoulders are on an angle, just like the other guy that we drew. So you can put a line right through like that to kind of signify where that shoulder line is going to go. Put the other one in. The rib cage, something like that. And the hips. Notice, guys, that I'm doing lots of circles. I'm drawing until it looks right. I'm not erasing anything. So if you draw light and you draw quickly and make many lines, it should turn out. Her knees are basically right underneath of her head. So you can even draw a circle sort of first before we draw the bone, so we can kind of figure out where it's going to go. And she's sitting on her feet, just like this. Now this arm is actually slightly bent. Now remember, because this joint is up, this is the limb that's supporting the weight, right? So it's going to be up, and it's going to be a little straighter, a little bit more load-bearing than the other one, right? Elbows around there. And her hand is basically right below, right behind her knees. Right, so it kind of comes down like that. That's where her hand is. And this arm, goes below goes below this. If this is kind of her area that she's sitting on right in here, it needs to go underneath, below that mark. Once we've got all of our bones on, we can start fleshing her out. Something like that. It's actually kind of nice. We don't actually see a whole lot of her legs. She's got kind of a skirt and stuff on, so we actually don't really know much of what they look like. There is another leg here, so just kind of draw that one in. Good. Okay, let's start putting a little bit more detail in. First, we gotta erase our guidelines, all the bones, all the stuff we don't need. Get rid of it. Okay, now let's start. I'm going to start with this her dress here. It's going to go up like that. And we can start putting in detail as we go, right? So we don't actually see any muscles, right? But we do see a lot of clothing, right? A lot of costume. So big long sleeves that hide the arms, right? A lot of puffy, sort of flowy garments. See the tendons of her neck. Kind of come down from her neck and into her clavicle or her collarbone, right in there. Okay, now we'll get the sleeve on. Very long, very flowy, and it obscures quite a bit, right? So she's a little closer to the knee, it looks like. So for instance, we see a little bit of a shadow right where this arm is. We don't actually see the arm itself, we just kind of see the shadow. It's translucent or transparent. Arm comes reaching out. Something like that. Don't have to worry too much about minor details like fingers and stuff. This is just a sketch. Okay, I'll get the back of her skirt on here. So she's some sort of little fairy princess sort of thing, so it's kind of got a ragged hem to her skirt. Bit of a belt area in there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's get a little bit of her hair in here. She's got a bit of a crown. Or a halo or something. It's very fluffy. So to get that kind of illusion of fluff, I'm just trying to draw on a bunch of small little lines, right? It's not a perfect line. It's just kind of this illusion of a line just by drawing smaller lines, right? And I'm drawing them away from the way the flow of the line would go. So if this is our line here, I'm not drawing them like this. I'm drawing it like this. Get some of our hair in. All right. Now if you want, you can put a little bit of the detail of her face in. Don't feel like you have to. I'm just gonna do a little bit real quick. Again, just a line for where the eyes go, that's fine. Not even gonna worry about the mouth too much, just kind of an area. Now you can start, if you want, putting in some of the values, and if you want, let's switch over to the 2B here, just because this is really dark in here. This whole area behind her arm, everything behind her arm is pretty dark. Now I'm using kind of a form of cross-hatching, right? It's just a bunch of lines. And what this does is just kind of really quickly allows you to get a semblance of shading down. It's not perfect by any means, but it is fast and it is pretty effective. It's kind of derives from like the old comic book styles and stuff like that. Old comic book styles, they still do this. So foot is quite dark. Cross-hatching is basically a really controlled way of scribbling, right? You have control over everything that you're doing, but it is just a bunch of lines. Okay, now if we want, we can get kind of a bit of a scene going on here too. Let's pretend that instead of her standing on a stool or kneeling on a stool, she's actually an actual fairy princess. We've got her wings here. An actual fairy princess who is kind of staring into a pool. So let's get her right on the bank of like a pond or something. Maybe there's some weeds or something like that. Really really great way to kind of tell stories and stuff is through illustration like this, right? So this is the edge of a pool right here. Maybe there's some other rocks or something in the background. And she's just barely touching that water. So we want sort of this sense of like ripples going out, right? Something like that. And there you have it. You have a pretty good illustration. Obviously not perfect. We went really quick, but you get a sense of what the figure's like. Now let's really quick, really see if this head is the right size, right? So if we have head there, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So she is still the right size. Everything is roughly the right proportions. Might be a little bit off, but it's pretty darn close. And so that gives us the when we use these heads like this, even though she's all curled up like this, the measurements are still correct. The proportions are still right. So you want to make sure that things are the right sizes, and so that you have figures that look natural and look correct, right? So yeah, give these a practice. This is a range of motion. Of course, we could also have an arm coming out like this, right? If we wanted to really get a range of where things could be, right? She could have maybe a magic wand and she's defending the pool or whatever, right? We could also do that. So yeah, just think about how you could position the limbs in order to make things look correct, right? But also reminding you where that range needs to lie. So yeah, keep practicing. I'm sure you guys did a good job. Send me what you guys have created.